When I was a little girl, I used to love fairy tales. Snow White, Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, it was my favorite. I was always encouraged how they would take something so broken and it would end up so beautiful. Well, as I've gotten older, I've come to realize life is not a fairy tale at all. It's very real. But you know, God can take our brokenness and He can make something so very beautiful. So join me as we explore chapter by chapter stories of faith, determination, and courage of people that you may very well know. You may not think you do, but we all have a story to tell.
I'm Lacie Duncan, and this is my story. When I was a little girl, it was me and my older sister, my younger brother, and my mom. And we moved around a whole lot. Things were inconsistent, but it didn't stop the fun that we used to have together. It didn't matter where we were, what shack we were living in, or what housing we were living in at the time. We always had time to make fun times for each other. And my mom loved to sing. She loved to dance. She loved to act really crazy. And she loved pulling us in that. And those are some of the best memories I have of her, when we could just be ourselves and there was nothing else that was in the way. There was no outside influence. There were no bad moments. There were no bad things coming in at those times. And I love that about her, that realness that she brought whenever she was in the room. You never wondered what she was thinking. You always knew. We loved to play board games, and she would tell jokes, really corny jokes. And we just had the best of times. And there were times when she would read to us at night when we knew that we were scared, or we weren't in the best house at the time, or we weren't in the best place at the time. She had ways of making it easy for the transition and making it easy for us to feel safe and for it to be okay. And she was definitely one of a kind, and I miss her very much. It'll be 8 years this July that she's been gone. A lot of laughter went on, but there was also a lot of heartache. She had a hard time making decisions, and the decisions that she did make affected all of us in a lot of ways. The decisions that she made caused me a lot of hurt and a lot of anger later on in life, and a lot of relationship issues and a lot of bitterness that I've carried for a very, very long time. So early on in my teenage years, some of the decisions my mother had made had led us to a really, really shady place. And she had another decision to make on what she wanted to do with her life, and what we wanted to do with ours. And she had asked us what we wanted to do. And me and my brother had made the unanimous decision to go live with my father. And that was a big deal. That was we had only seen him every other weekend, and now we were moving in with him and his new wife. And life got pretty crazy there for a little while with that, because we didn't know how to live with him. We didn't know him that way. Like I said, we only seen him 2 weeks, 2 weekends out of the month, so it was new. So it was kind of like we had to learn him all over, and he had to learn us all over. So there was a lot of rebellion there, and there was a lot of anger still, because I felt like I'd been given up, like I had been just pushed to the side. I didn't feel important. I didn't feel good. I didn't feel worthy. Into middle school, into high school, I wasn't very popular. I liked everybody, mostly everybody. I'd like to think most of them liked me, but that's not true. And now when I look back on things, I was hurt, and I didn't know how bad I was hurting on the inside. Nobody knew how bad I was hurting on the inside. And it was so easy to put on that fake face and to pretend to be somebody that I wasn't. And every day I would come home and I was never proud of the person that I was showing. And I didn't know how to change that. And I just kept slipping into this fakeness, I guess, of who I desired to be. I would sit in my room alone and I would cry. And I didn't cry out to God because I didn't know anything about Him. And I remember sitting there thinking how alone I was. And I was so tired of feeling alone. And that there were so many times that I was just like, nobody would miss me. If I could just run away, if I could just move, if I could just go away, nobody would care. Nobody would know. And those thoughts consumed my mind a lot of my teenage years. Around 18, 19, I started experimenting with drugs. Not some of my prouder moments. And it started out small, like started smoking cigarettes, and because that was the cool thing to do. And then started smoking pot because everybody was doing it. And then, started the drinking, which was never my strongest stuff ever. I just was never a drinker. And it just escalated from there. And with the drugs came more suppression and more just tugging away all the feelings and all the hurt and all the bitter and all the angry. And I was never real. I was never real with myself. I didn't know how to be anybody but who everybody else was being, who everybody else expected me to be. I understand when people say, lonely, they never knew lonely. I've known lonely, and I've been surrounded by people my whole life and been alone. And it's not a very good place to be when you're a teenager and you're impressionable and you're vulnerable, and you already come from something broken and inconsistent, and you feel the brokenness and that you're not ever going to be able to be fixed, and that nobody cares enough to fix you. So you seek things out when the brokenness, and you learn. I learned to push it to the side. Excuse me. I learned to push it to the side, and I learned how to seek out other things that filled me. I thought it was relationships. I thought it was more drugs. I thought it was men. And I didn't care about the people that I was hurting that was in my path. I hurt people. I hurt a lot of people. And I hurt a lot of the people that cared about me. And I didn't care. Right after my teenage years, I got into some really heavy drugs. And I was in a very unhealthy relationship. And it was unhealthy from the start. I thought I was in love. I thought that this was what love was, and that, someone that was telling me all the things that I yearned to hear forever. And he was older than me, so apparently knew the game. And I was hooked. And I just wanted to be with him, and I just wanted to do what he was doing, and I just wanted to be accepted. And I slipped into more drugs and this life of just utter hell. It was pure hell. And I let him say things to me and do things to me that I've normally let nobody else do. And I thought I deserved that, and I thought that that's what was intended for me because I didn't know any better. I didn't see any better growing up. My parents weren't married. I didn't know what a marriage was. I didn't know what a relationship was. I didn't know how to be in a relationship with anyone. I didn't know how to be that friend. I didn't know how to be that girlfriend. I didn't know how, and I just assumed that this is how it was supposed to be. There was a time when I left, because I would leave and I would come back. I would leave and then I would come back because I thought that I loved this man and I thought that I could change him. And you can't change someone that doesn't want to change. And little did I know that I wasn't ready to change. I was still ready to manipulate, and I still wanted I wanted to have that control. I knew that if I had control, that everything was going to be okay. If it was going my way, if it was everything, I wanted control. And the last time that I left, it got even worse for me. I sunk into a depression that I had never known before. I had sunken into a different drug, 4 or 5 more different drugs. And I had only slipped further into this downward spiral. I had lost everything that I thought that meant anything to me. I'd pushed everyone away that cared about me because, again, I thought I was alone, and I had held on to that. And I made some really ugly decisions. I'd only known to make those decisions. I'd never been taught to make a better decision. I didn't know how. So I was only following what I'd been shown. And I thought that this was it. This was how my life was going to end. I was in Carsville, and I was sitting in a little bitty bathroom in a little trailer out in the middle of nowhere. And I remember sitting there, and my heart was beating so fast, and I just wanted it to stop. And I was like, well, I can go do one more, and it would stop. One more. It'd just take one more, and it would stop. And I sat there, and I contemplated that one more. And something rose up within me. And I know now what it is, but at the time I didn't. And there was a fight that rose up in me. And instantly, I didn't want to do this anymore. I wanted my heart to keep beating. I wanted to live. I wanted to figure out what else there was about this life, because this could not be it for me. There was no way at 25 years old that this was my life, that this was the end of my life. So I made a decision, and it was one of the first real adult best decisions that I ever made. And I stood up out of that bathroom, and I went for a walk. And I just knew that I had to walk it out, walk it off, because I knew it was going to be a little while. I was going to be up for a little while. And I was just like, well, might as well get her going. And after about a day and a half, because I had all that time to think about what I wanted to do, I was going to change. I was going to change my life. I was about to break off everything that had ever been on my life. And I was about to prove to somebody that I was somebody. And everything that had ever been said about me, all the times that I was told that I was never going to amount to anything, that I was always going to be just that girl, that I was always going to be just this one, like right here, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was going to change all that in my life. Something rose up in the inside of me that I couldn't explain it then, but I knew that I was getting ready to fight. And I was in a fight for my life, and I wasn't backing down anymore. But those next 3 weeks were part of the hardest 3 weeks of my life. I was sick, and I felt like I was dying. But I knew I was dying. I knew what was dying, and it wasn't me. I knew the sickness was going away. I knew the addiction was leaving. And every day I got stronger, and every day I got more determined. I might have laid around for a couple of weeks because I didn't feel very good. But every time I got sick, I got mad. And I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. So every time I got sick, I was like, let it out. Let it out. I'm done. I am so done with this life. I am so done with the shame and the guilt and the defeat. I'm done. And I got up and I held my head up and I walked away. I walked away from anything and everything that ever caused me pain, that ever caused me hurt. And I started my life over. I went back to him, and I told him, I said, I'm getting clean. And if you want to be a part of that, then I need you to be clean too. And he wasn't ready. And it hurt. It hurt a lot because I thought that was just where I was supposed to be. But it comes back, again to where you can't fix someone that doesn't want to be fixed. So I kept on pushing every day. Every day I'd get up and I'd made a choice that I was not going back to that life. There was many times that I had the opportunity to. There was many times that I had the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm just going to give up. I mean, this is too hard. This is just way too hard. I can't do this on my own. And it was in my face. It was in my face day in, day out. And yet I knew that night in that bathroom that I made that choice, that I was not going back. And I stood my ground. I still had a lot of struggles. I still had a lot of cleaning up and a lot of refinement, a lot of pruning and tuning. And I'd gotten off the hard drugs. I'd been off the hard drugs for a while, and I was in a better place. I was beginning to be in a better place. And I ended up pregnant with my daughter, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. One of the best things that ever happened to me. She saved my life. When I got pregnant with her, it was an instant change on the inside. I knew now that I was going to be responsible for another little person, and that I was going to be responsible for her, that I was going to get to teach her the things that I didn't get taught, and I was going to get to show her the things that I didn't get shown, and that I was going to get to love her in a way that I was still seeking and that I never knew that I needed. And everything in me just wanted to shower her with all that love and to tell her how loved she was and to show her how loved she was and how she saved me. And to tell her how precious she was and that I would never leave her and that I would always be there for her and that she would never feel alone. And she would never feel abandoned by me. And that she could always turn to me. I would never judge her. I would never condemn her. I'd always, always be there for her. And that I would love her unconditionally till my last breath. And I made that my purpose. And I was very adamant about it. Very vocal about it. Everybody around me thought I was taking it a little over, a little too far, but they didn't know the backstory. And they didn't understand where I was coming from because they weren't there. But I was determined. And anybody that knows me knows that once I set my mind to something, it's set. It is set, and changing it's very, very hard. And I was determined to make that life for her. And I wasn't going to let anyone get in the way. Me and her dad We were young. I believe it was more of just lust than it was us just being in love with each other. We were not ready to be together. We were not ready to be a mom and a dad together. We both had issues that we needed to work out with ourselves. I was very selfish and very hard-headed. Still am hard-headed some. But I, again, was in that place where this was going to go my way. This was my daughter. It wasn't our daughter. It wasn't, our relationship. This was my daughter, and this was what I was going to do. And either you can be a part of it or you don't have to. He would come around, when I would let him. He tried. He tried to be in her life a lot more than I would allow him to be. There was just times and circumstances where I just didn't feel like he needed to be around her. I didn't trust that. I didn't trust a whole lot of people at that point. I didn't really even trust myself, but I knew what I didn't want. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew what I didn't want. You fast forward a couple of years, it was just me and her, and we had a great relationship. She was so strong and so independent and so smart and witty and funny. I was okay with it just being me and her. Again, I was being selfish. I was keeping things from her that she needed, and at the time I had no idea that that's what I was doing, but I was setting her up for failure. And when I had that realization that I was doing that to her, it broke my heart. Because it was one of the things that I was so determined that I wasn't going to do to her. Little did I know God had a plan for my life. And he put a young man in my life. And, at the time it was just like, we're just friends, and here it is. And he's a lot younger than me. So any woman that had a chance to date a man younger than her, who wasn't going to jump on that? And we had a date, and we've been together ever since. And we dated for about 6 months, and he proposed, and I told him no. And I guess you could say I was playing hard to get, but at the same time I was being selfish. I just wasn't ready to share my life. I wasn't ready to share my baggage. I wasn't ready to open up. I had built a wall around my heart and around my life, and I lived in a little bubble with just me and my daughter. And any outside influence was gonna mess with that, and I didn't want anything messing with that. Everything was where I wanted it to be. And God seemed different. So when Nick asked me to marry him, it was on Mother's Day, and a lot of years had passed between me and my mom, and she had gotten really sick, and she'd been diagnosed with lung cancer, and she'd already been doing her chemo treatments, and it just so happened that she was at my house that day, and I helped cut her hair. It was falling out, and she looked really silly, and I was like, Mom, we just need to get rid of that. I can't go out in public with you looking like that. Like, I love you, but we have to fix that. And of course she thought that was hilarious, so she let me shave her head, and I painted her nails, and I done her toenails, and we sat there and we talked. And I told her, I said, Mom, I said, he asked me to marry him. And she said, are you ready? And I said, no. And she said, is he good to your daughter? And I said, absolutely. And she said, well, what is one thing that you love most about him, that you know that he's the right one? And I said, he makes me laugh. I said, he makes me laugh. And I said, he makes me feel good, And she says, well, there you go, And that was one of the last conversations that her and I had where we weren't arguing and we weren't fighting. we were actually getting along. It was a little over a year after that's when she died. That was really hard when she passed, because there were so many things that I wanted to say to her. Because after I got married and after I seen how Nick was with Jaden and the relationship that him and her had and the relationship that him and I had, I was figuring out a marriage. I was figuring out a relationship with someone else that wasn't just about me. And how I loved my daughter so much, and I couldn't understand how a mother went about the things that she did and made the decisions that she made that upset so much with her family. And I had so many questions for her, and I wanted answers, and I was angry with her for a very long time. And I wish that I would have done it a lot sooner. I wish that I'd had taken that time to get over myself, over my selfish pride, and just come out and asked her why. And I never got that opportunity. And the day she died, me and my aunt, my brother and my sister were there. And I was holding her hand. And I said, Mama, I said, I love you. And I need to know that you love me back. And the cancer had already spread to her liver and to her brain. And she couldn't really talk very well. But she was able to say, I love you. And in that moment, I knew that all the questions and everything that I needed to ask her was never going to get to come. And that her I love you was going to have to be enough. And after she died, I was filled with so much regret. And I would have given anything for her to call. At that time, I didn't even care if it was an argument. It was just, call me, please. Talk to me. And I didn't have that. And I was never going to get those answers. I was never going to get to ask those questions. And I think there's a reason. I think God had a reason for that. There might have been some answers that I wasn't ready to receive. And maybe I wasn't strong enough yet, emotionally or mentally or spiritually, to accept those answers. And I'm thankful for that now. Back then I wasn't. I was angry. I wasn't angry at God. I was angry with myself. God has replaced all those things that have been taken away from me. And He has replaced it all with something so good. The family that He's given me, and the church family that He's given me, and where I'm at in my life right now and in my walk with Him. I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. So me and Nick, we got married in September, and on March the 29th of that following year, on my birthday, I found out that I was pregnant with our son, Colton. And of course he was ecstatic because we were having a boy. He already had his daughter, so now he needed a son. So we were a family of 4, and we were trying to do things right. You know, we were going to church, and a little old church in Lola, you know, where his family went, and great church, great people. And a friend of mine she's been my best friend for for a long time. I'm not going to give away the time because that gives away my age, and we're not doing that. So she invited me to church, and I was kind of standoffish at first because she wasn't one that really went to church or believed. So it really threw me off when she invited me. And I was like, yeah, and I kind of blew it off. Well, I started seeing the changes in her, how her life was changing and how she was changing and how her person was changing. And I was curious. I was like, this is not the girl that I knew all these years ago, and what's going on with you? And she sat me down on my front porch one day, and she's like, I'm about to tell you. And she's telling me how this church that she was going to, and how it had changed her husband's life, and how it had changed her life, and how it had saved her marriage. And it was changing everything all the way around, and she was in such a better place than she's ever been in her whole life. And I was like, I need in on some of that. And she was like, you need to come with me. She said, there's a women's conference coming up. And I was like, okay, that sounds like fun, you know. And I said, well, where are we going? And she said, it's out there at Life in Christ. I said, where's that? I had no idea. And she was telling me where it was, and I was like, now, I've heard somebody talking about that church. And she said, don't believe all that. And I was like, okay. Well, I was giving her the benefit of the doubt. So I came to a women's conference, and I didn't know what to expect. I thought we were just coming to hear some women talk, and, you know, little did I know that the praise and worship was going to be on fire, and that the word that was being spoken was going to be on fire. And there was some things going on that I had never seen before, which kind of made me feel a little uncomfortable. And I remember telling her that when we got in the parking lot, that I was probably going to choke her because I was very freaked out. And little did I know. So almost about a month had passed. And she was like, you know, she just kept on. She was very persistent. And anybody that knows Jimmy Denise, she's very persistent in getting what she wants. And she kept inviting and kept inviting. Well, the more that I came, the more of this yearning that I had, this hunger that I'd never experienced before was rising up inside of me. And I wanted more. I needed to know more. And the more that I came, the more I felt like this is where I needed to be. Like it was overwhelming, the feeling that I had, that this is where I needed to be. There was something that was drawing me here, and it was new, and it was kind of scary, but I knew that it was like I had to follow through with it. I mean, the curiosity got the best of me. So I started coming, and I started coming on a regular basis. Well, then my husband started coming, and then my family started coming, and then his mom and dad started coming. And we've been coming here now for 7 years. Got baptized in the old building. I remember standing over there in the old building, and Debbie West was singing "It Is Well." And I felt that tug on my heart for the first time. And I immediately raised my hands, and I know that it wasn't me raising my hands, but I had that overwhelming peace and joy and this sense of love that come over me that I will never, ever forget. And I knew right then that that was my moment. And I raised both of my hands, and I surrendered everything I had right then and there and asked God to come into my heart. And my life has been a whirlwind ever since. It hasn't been easy, but it's definitely been an adventure. And I can think of nothing more now than to come when the doors are open, to have my family here, to have them in the Word, and to teach them the love of God. I never knew love like that it even existed until I felt Him wrap His arms around me for the first time. I look back on things now, and his hands were all over every situation in my life. He pulled me from the mud. He pulled me from the dark. He pulled me from the mess that I was in. And he's placed me in a spot where he can use me to reach people. He has taught me so much about myself. To read his word and to read how he feels about me and what he thinks about me and how precious I am and how loved I am and how much he cherishes me, and that no matter where I'm at, he's there with me. I'm never alone anymore. I can't imagine a day going by and not feeling his presence and not wanting to be in that moment with him. He has placed gifts down on the inside of me that I never knew that I had. And I get the opportunity to be a servant for him and to give back the gift that he's given me. And there's not a day that goes by that I'm not thankful for that he's allowed me to be a vessel. I mean, what an honor to be a vessel for God. So 2 things that really stand out to me about life in Christ and about Pastor Chris and Pastor Sue is their teachings on marriage. I didn't know how to be married. I didn't see a healthy marriage growing up. And when Nick and I got married, it wasn't healthy. You know, I mean, we thought it was, but the more we were getting into the Word and the more that we were coming, the more we realized that there was something else that was missing. And I love their teachings on marriage because it opened up so many things to both of us. And I remember calling Sue one day, and I was like, I need to talk to you. This is going on, and this is going on. And she's like, all right, well, let's just set up a time. And I went over there to the office, and I sat down, and I talked to her, and I was spilling all this stuff out. And she turned around, and she looked at me, and I will never forget it because I didn't know how to take it at first. And she says, well, what have you done? And I said, excuse me. She said, what have you done? And I said, well, what do you mean, what have I done? She said, you are sitting here, and she said, you're pouring all this stuff out on what he's done, but what have you done? And I didn't know what to say. I was back in that selfish mode where it was all about someone else's issue. It was their fault. It was all their fault. And she talked to me, and she explained some things to me, and she was being a mom, Mama Sue. And I sat down and I wrote him a letter. And I apologized to him. I got to read it out loud to him. Sue and Chris was there. And I got to sit down across from him and read it out to him. And I apologized to him. And I told him how sorry that I was for taking him for granted. And that how sorry I was that I didn't know how to be who he needed me to be. But that was going to be my goal from here on out, was to be the wife that he needed, to be the mother that my children needed, to be the friend and the supporter that he needed, and that I was going to do everything I could to change that about my life, and that I was sorry that I was being so selfish, and that how much that I wasn't putting him before me, and I was putting my kids before him. And they've taught us that it's God, your spouse, and then your children. So anytime that there was a marriage conference, we were here. Anytime that there was couples at their house, we were there, because we yearned so much for something that we had never seen, that we had never experienced before. And their teaching on marriage is incredible. It's saved our marriage, and I'm sure that it has saved countless other marriages in this church, but it has done wonders for mine. It has strengthened our faith together. It has strengthened our faith in each other. We've learned how to put God first in our marriage, and we've learned how to communicate with each other and listen to each other and love each other the way that God intended us to love each other. And we're learning how to grow with each other and respect each other's differences. And there's ever time that we get out of balance, we can always come to them. They've always been there for us, always. There's never been any judgment from them. There's never been any condemnation from them. They have loved on me since the very start. They have loved on my family. And for that, I'm forever grateful. They have poured into me and my family. They have told me nothing but truth. They have corrected me even when I didn't feel like I needed it or I wanted to hear it. But they were doing it with grace, and they done it with love. The second thing was our life group. We have a small group, life group, and it was a freedom class. And going through that class, it changed my life. I did not know things about myself until they were pointed out to me, and by other people in my group. And the reading and the teaching and the walking through that with other people like myself, that was there was a lot of freedom in that alone, knowing that there was more people in there that were just like me and that were going through the same things that I was going through. And we all learned how to be open with each other and how to be honest with each other and to come forth and talk about things that we've never talked about with anyone else. And we all became closer, and we all realized how much we needed each other. And at the end of that class, there's a conference when we all get together, and the teaching gets deeper, and it's intense. It's very intense. And if you haven't been through it, you're missing it. You're missing a big part of what God's wanting for your life, because there are so many things. There was so much bondage that I was in that I didn't even know that I was in, that I broke free from. Chains of shame and guilt that held me down for years broke off. Anger and bitterness was gone. I had the opportunity to lay everything down at God's feet on that day. I learned how to forgive and what it meant to forgive. And it changed my life. And if you haven't been through it, then trust me when I tell you it's the real deal, and it will change your life. You have a choice every day to decide how your day's going to go and how you're going to live your life. And He's given that to you. He's given that free will to you. And I choose every day to get up and thank Him for all that He's given me, because He has blessed me beyond measure. I have had a lot of struggles along the way, but now, the season I'm in and where I'm at, and I know who I am. I know whose I am. And I know my purpose. And I know my reasoning for why I'm here. And I'm here for such a time as this. I'm Lacie Duncan, and that was my story.